and now I'm unhappy and I'm frustrated and this thing sucks and I hate the system.
My friends, let's talk about doctors and dating. There's an app or 3 for that. This is an article on Medscape. Pounding heart, sweating, insomnia, surges of dopamine, norepinephrine, and adrenaline. All symptoms of a very common yet frustrating condition: falling in love. The prognosis is vague. A prescription pad and knowledge of biochemistry aren't helpful when it comes to relationships. There are few recent data on this, but a 2012 longitudinal study of more than 20,000 physicians by the UK Medical Careers Research Group found that by the age of 25, the rate of doctors who were in partnerships was far lower than in the general population. However, the survey showed that by age 36, the number of doctors in long-term relationships had exceeded non-physicians by more than 10% for women and 20% for men. Medscape's 2022 Physician Happiness and Lifestyle Report found that 83% were in committed relationships, and even better, happy ones. At least 3/4 of doctors in every specialty describe their partnerships as very good or good. How should a single medical student, resident, or attending physician find happiness ever after in 2023? Sometimes Miss or Miss Right can be found in the anatomy lab or hospital, with sparks flying between students or colleagues. But for many in healthcare, along with millions of others looking for love, the solution is dating apps. Dr. M, a psychiatry resident in California who prefers to not give her name, hadn't found a life partner during college, grad school, or medical school. When she passed the final Step 3 board exam, she decided it was time to take the plunge. She signed up for popular dating apps like Hinge, Bumble, and Coffee Meets Bagel, but her dates seemed to follow a disappointing pattern. I met a lot of guys, but it was incredibly rare to find another physician, says Dr. M. I found myself always wanting to talk about life as a resident. For those who've watched my other dating videos, you know how I feel about talking about medicine with your significant other. More often than not, the guys would give me this blank stare as I complained about being on call or spoke about spending 12 hours a day studying for a board exam, or even the process of the match and how I ended up in California. That sounds to me more like a social miscalibration. If you're complaining a lot, then yeah, no one's gonna really want that. That was when Dr. M saw an ad for a dating app with a cute medical name, Down to Date, a play on the clinical evidence resource Up to Date. I thought it was a meme, she recalls. That's actually a really great name for a dating app. It was this doctors only app. I remember thinking this has to be a joke, but then it was very real. All right, so they require your ID, your NPI number, and men began requesting a consult in the app's form of liking her profile and sending her pages or messages. That's funny. And for those who are wondering what we're drinking today, this is Tea Guan Yin, or is it Tie Guan Yin? I know I'm butchering that pronunciation. This is from Tea Bloom, their master's collection. It's loose leaf oolong. I love oolongs, and you can find it with 10% off, link in the description. All right, this is where it gets juicy. If you're a male and you tell people you're a doctor, it seems like it really attracts people, Boyer says. But if you're female, it brings up a lot of stereotypes where you're perceived as too intimidating, either as the breadwinner, being more educated, or having a demanding career. It does make it more difficult. This video is, of course, very subjective, so I'm gonna tell you my perspective. I think this idea that a lot of guys get intimidated by a woman who is successful in her career has never been my experience personally. And I'm not saying that's not applicable to other guys. People tend to just jump to the conclusion, oh, they're just intimidated. It's like, well, maybe they are, but there could be other reasons too, which we'll get to shortly. Around the same time that Down to Date began, Shivani Shah Dio, a pediatric neurology resident at Duke, and her brother Sagar Shah, an entrepreneur, had a similar idea. The sibling duo developed Forever X, an app for healthcare workers to find meaningful and long-term romantic connections, launched in 2021. And a lot of these seem to be coming out from the COVID pandemic. I know I was feeling very lonely. I entered into a relationship that I think both me and the other person knew we weren't like a great match, but anyways, loneliness was a huge issue for a lot of people, myself included, during lockdown and such. She acknowledges that certain requirements, like a desire for children, might be crucial to some users. Many female doctors in their 30s feel the time crunch of a ticking biological clock. Very valid, and I think that actually can add stress and sometimes be off-putting to the opposite gender or to whoever you're trying to date. The reason being, people are very averse to neediness. And if it's clear that you're really in a rush to date and have kids and settle down, the other person can pick up on that and they can think, hey, something's off here, I'm not feeling comfortable, and it can actually push them away. Optimize your dateability. All right, this is where I come in because I was interviewed for this, but you know, the way these articles work, they have to take a very small amount of what you say, so I had a lot more to say. I think people either love or hate dating apps, and I love them, says Kevin Jabal, MD. I get to meet cool people and schedule dates from the comfort of my home. I would add some nuance there and say it's complicated. There's ups and downs, right? There are, I think after being single for 2 years or 2.5 years, then I was starting to get a bit tired of dating apps because I felt like I couldn't find something of substance that I was willing to pursue further. Story time. Dental student visiting from out of state. Her folks are here in Vegas. We're chatting for several weeks, maybe even a month or more before we first meet up. And right before our first date's on a Sunday, she texts me that afternoon, get ready to delete Hinge. I figure, hey, maybe she's cocky, she's confident, whatever. Not a big deal, although kind of a strange thing to say. First date goes fine. She takes off she has like some kind of bracelet or some jewelry that she takes off and misplaces. And we spend literally 10 minutes trying to find this. We finally find it, give it to her, and then she leaves. And as I'm walking back in, I see it on my table. Wait, we just spent so much time looking for it. Why did she leave it? Okay, that's strange. The next morning, it's Monday morning, it's a work day. She's like, hey, do you have time for a walk? Let's go on a walk this evening. And I was like, oh, hey, like it's a work day. I got meetings. I actually used to meet with my my director of content locally every Monday evening. But also I was thinking, it's the next day. Probably can wait a few days before we hang out again. And she says, okay, well, I gotta pick up my bracelet. I left it at your house. I said, yeah, sure, come anytime. We're actually just meeting in my house, so I'll be here. Just ring the doorbell and I'll bring it out to you. Rings the doorbell, I bring it out. And it's a very pleasant, very sweet interaction. She gives me a little kiss, things are fine, and go back in, finish my work. And then I messaged her on Wednesday, it doesn't go through. Normally it was iMessage, it's blocked. And looking at my Hinge, your account has been banned. I say, okay, it has to be her. Like the coincidence of her blocking my texts and me being banned at the same time, that's very unusual. But I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Why would she even block me? Like we had a pleasant interaction. And I don't know what she said to Hinge. They don't tell you why you've been banned, but they just say you've been banned. And I said that I'm not following why, because we had a pleasant date. Here is the recording from my camera of her coming back the next day and having a sweet interaction with me. You can hear the audio. We're being very polite and friendly and affectionate and whatever. And their response was like just another generic, yeah, your appeal has been denied and you're banned from Hinge. Very frustrating at the time, obviously. But this was about 2 years ago, and around the same time I met my current girlfriend, so now it doesn't really matter. But looking back, it looks like she was more interested in me than I was in her, and when I didn't reciprocate that, she got hurt, frustrated, whatever, and then lied to Hinge to say whatever she needed to say to then get me banned, which, pretty fucked. Those who hate dating apps or receive few matches would do well to look inward instead of blaming the process, he advised. It helps to view the experience as a learning tool that provides feedback very quickly. If you want to find a really amazing person, then you need to be what you want to find, says Jabal. If you want to find someone who's fit and intelligent and well-read and well-traveled, you need to be that. Otherwise, you're probably not going to attract that person. Modern dating is obviously very complex, and this little snippet I have here is not telling the whole story. I think those who are frustrated with dating apps, some portion of them may have very high expectations as for the type of partner they want, and they want to go out of their league, so to speak, to get this kind of partner that may not be attracted to them, and that's why they're very frustrated. Other people may actually not have that issue at all, but just based on the algorithms and the way that the dating apps work, they're not trying to get you into long-term relationships. They're trying to keep you on their platform and keep making money from you from paying whatever subscription or upgrades or whatever. And then people start having this nexting where they don't want to actually commit and get to know someone because they always want to see what's next on the app. Is there something better out there, right? But I think what I'm trying to get at here is there are a very large proportion of people who would benefit from trying to become better themselves. Oftentimes, we look at the thing we want. I want a relationship. And if I'm not getting it,
and now I'm unhappy and I'm frustrated and this thing sucks and I hate the system.
Versus, I'm not getting a relationship that I want. How can I be responsible for that? It's not even a question of whose fault is it, but it's now your responsibility and now you have agency to say, I am gonna make myself better. And I'm gonna enjoy that process. I'm gonna become more fit. I'm gonna become more X, Y, and Z. And paradoxically, if you actually do that for yourself and you try to be the best version of yourself because you just want to love yourself and you have one life, make the most of it, then you become more attractive as a byproduct. However, don't fall for the tricks of these guys that go really deep into pickup and such, where I actually think that those who are really struggling to even get on a first date or even talk to a girl or whatever, okay, there might be some stuff in pickup just to help you understand how to communicate with someone. But then there's guys that go really deep in it, and these are the guys that you don't want to be because their whole personality becomes pickup, and they oftentimes will have compromised morals. They won't have much else going on in their lives because they're so focused on this endeavor. And the next thing you know, they're 40 years old and they're still single and they don't have much of a life other than just their job and then dating. So yeah, I've said that since the beginning and I'll say it again. Don't focus on dating and being attractive as your first primary goal. Let it be a secondary, tertiary, quaternary thing. And it actually gets a lot better that way, paradoxically. Because if you make it your primary thing, you kind of become a loser. Ify Williams, MD, a psychiatrist in Washington, D.C., believes a wider dating pool is key, provided everyone understands the situation up front. When Williams started residency in 2014, she was as single as can be. You go, girl. She tried many dating apps, but they were extremely time-consuming. Even when she set specific preferences, she found herself sifting through matches that didn't fit her criteria. Dating nowadays has become almost like a second job, says Williams. Just the amount of time that people are having to spend on apps, swiping left and right, and then meeting people, you think they're interested, and then you deal with all these games. I agree. I think that it can be frustrating when you meet people and you think it's going in a certain way, and then they ghost you. But isn't it also kind of amazing that you can sit in the comfort of your home and doctors are working really long hours. When I was in residency, it was so hard to meet people outside of the hospital because you're just spending so much time in the hospital. Isn't it amazing then that I can sit on the toilet or be at the restaurant waiting for my food, spend 10, 20, maybe 30 minutes in a day, do some swiping, do some messaging, and then set up dates where I can actually meet cool, interesting people later that week or the next week. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But that's something that I think is a large net positive for the most part rather than a large net negative. By 2017, Williams had invented Miss Doctor, a dating app that would connect female physicians and other doctoral level professionals with men or women on a similar achievement level. By definition, these people would not be intimidated by ambitious, busy women. They would be heavily screened and vetted. And one other proviso, they would have to pay for likes. Most dating apps charge a subscription fee. Users are allowed to like numerous profiles and perhaps not bother responding to many matches. By contrast, Miss Doctor accounts are free and include a limited number of likes to indicate interest. Beyond that, there's a price. That's actually a really cool idea because now you have to be a lot more intentional, right? Male or female, there is general agreement that finding time to date as a young physician isn't easy. While Down to Date has had doctor meets doctor success stories, many users are still searching for the one. Boyer believes that career challenges are not a reason to give up. There are so many single and available people out there, she says, and everyone's deserving of love, even if you only have an hour a week. All right, good article, but one thing that I alluded to earlier is the idea that guys get intimidated, right? I think that can sometimes be the issue, but I think what's more commonly the issue and what has been my experience, well, let's actually backtrack. Way back when, several years ago, I would get very impressed if a girl had some level of achievement and she went to a great school or had a great career or whatever. I was like, that's cool, that's hot, that's attractive. And then I dated some of those girls. And I found that my personality and their personality didn't match. You had a little bit too much of this like type A clashing where both people had strong personalities, strong convictions on how things should be done. There were other things too. Like sometimes people would feel very self-conscious about their intelligence and would feel like their achievements weren't their own, but they were handed to them because, I mean, we all know that in academia, a lot of your achievements can be very much who you know and who your parents are and such. And obviously that's a small minority of people. I'm just pointing out a couple instances from my experience. The clusters of personalities that associated with these high achieving, very intelligent, very successful women didn't really mesh well with my needs. And what I ended up finding out later on, and this is, I think, a great thing with dating apps, is that at the beginning, I may have thought, hey, being intelligent and successful and whatever, someone that's kind of on my level is important to me. I later found out, actually, that's really not. What I care a lot more about would be someone who has similar family values, who is really caring and nurturing and considerate, someone who's funny, someone who's not super easily offended, which if they've gone really high up in academia, and academia tends to lean more in one direction, and they tend to say, hey, you can't joke about X, Y, and Z, then oftentimes like the sense of humor wouldn't mesh. These were values that, as I reflected on what I wanted in life, were much more important. So was I intimidated by women who were highly successful? No. And I think there's a lot of guys who feel similarly, where it's not that they're intimidated, it just doesn't really mesh with what they value more. And that's okay. We all have different preferences and you can't make someone right or wrong for having their own preference. Now, the other thing that's missing here is this discussion of hypergamy, right? When it comes to social hierarchies and socioeconomic status, men tend to date across and below, whereas women do the opposite. They date across and above. So when you're a highly successful woman who's some top dog neurosurgeon, you're looking for someone who's at your level or above. And that pool is so small. There are very few men who are on your level when you're that much of a badass. But what makes it even harder is that the guys who are at that level, they don't necessarily feel the same way, and that they are fine dating across and below. They don't necessarily need another neurosurgeon or someone else who's on their level to match them. They're okay going lower if the person matches their other priorities, their other values. But when you consider those two things, the number of men at that level being so small, and them also looking at, a large range of women, not just the women up there, you have this issue that, of course, a lot of people are going to go unmatched. And you see many successful women doctors struggling to date as a result. Now, again, this is all broad level stuff. I'm sure we're going to get many people in the comments saying how I'm totally wrong and they're totally different and they don't care about this or that. I get it. We're talking about just population levels, right? I can't talk about every single individual, obviously. But at the end of the day, there are a few key takeaways, right? First of all, dating is a skill. You can improve on it, just like you can improve at many things in life. It's not just fixed. And part of that is by intentionally working on getting better photos and having better interactions on the dating apps and being a more interesting person to talk to on actual dates. Those are all things that are going to help. But becoming better at dating can also be a secondary or tertiary benefit of other pursuits, like you working on your own health and fitness, professional success, being an interesting person, following your passions, right? Those all make you better at dating too, even though becoming better at dating isn't the main goal. And at the same time, dating is really hard, and I applaud these women who are creating their own dating apps to try to ameliorate the situation. But I don't know how much guys are gonna care to meet other physicians, right? If I'm an MD, there is value, and it's super cool to partner up with another MD because I need this power couple, and that's badass, and there's upsides to it, but there's also downsides. And if both are super career driven, it's a lot tougher to figure out, hey, who's gonna take some time away and help with the family? Unfortunately, that's the world of dating that we're in right now. I think there are some upsides. I think there are obviously a lot of downsides as well. And you gotta work within the system. You gotta do what you can because it's hard for a single person to really cause any meaningful change in the broader system. So anyways, let me know what you agree with. Let me know what I got wrong. Much love. See you in the next one.